The night Caleb Ryder pulled a bleeding stranger from a crumpled luxury SUV in the middle of a storm, he had no idea he was rescuing one of the most powerful women in America, or that saving her life would shatter everything he'd worked so hard to protect. Vivienne Laurent didn't believe in heroes. She believed in contracts, leverage, and keeping people at a distance. But the quiet single father who asked for nothing in return would become the one person she couldn't afford to lose, and the one her enemies would try to destroy. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you into a night that changed 2 lives forever. The rain came down like nails against the windshield. Caleb Ryder squinted through the downpour, his pickup truck crawling along the dark highway outside Portland. The wipers were losing the fight. Water sheeted across the glass faster than the blades could clear it, turning the road into a blurred nightmare of asphalt and reflected taillights. He should have been home an hour ago. Sophie would be worried. She always worried when he worked late, even though Mrs. Chen from next door stayed with her until he got back. 8 years old and already carrying too much fear in her small chest, fear that one day he wouldn't come home, just like her mother hadn't. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't let himself think about Rachel often. Thinking about her meant remembering the morning he'd found the note on the kitchen counter, the divorce papers underneath, and Sophie's confused face when she asked why Mommy's clothes were gone. That was 4 years ago. 4 years of learning how to braid hair and pack lunches and explain why some people leave without saying goodbye. The radio crackled with a weather advisory, severe thunderstorm warning, roads flooded in 3 counties. He turned it off. He didn't need a voice telling him what he could already see. Lightning split the sky. In that brief flash of white, Caleb saw it. A dark shape twisted against the guardrail about 50 yards ahead, metal glinting wrong in the rain. His foot hit the brake. The truck fishtailed slightly before the tires gripped. Caleb pulled onto the narrow shoulder, hazard lights blinking into the storm. He grabbed the flashlight from under the seat and stepped out into the deluge. The cold hit him like a fist. Rain soaked through his jacket in seconds, plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He swept the flashlight beam across the wreckage. It was a black SUV, something expensive, the kind with leather interiors and price tags that could feed his family for a year. The front end was crumpled around a concrete barrier. The driver's side door hung open, bent on its hinges. Glass glittered across the pavement like scattered diamonds. "Hello?" Caleb shouted over the storm. No answer. He moved closer, boots splashing through water. The beam found the interior. Airbags deployed, dashboard shattered. Blood on the steering wheel. His chest tightened. "Anybody in there?" A groan. Caleb ran to the passenger side. The door was jammed. He braced his boot against the frame and yanked hard. Metal shrieked. The door gave. 2 people inside. The driver, a man in his 50s wearing a suit, slumped unconscious against the deployed airbag, blood running from a gash above his eye. His breathing was shallow but steady. The passenger was a woman. She was pressed against the far door, one hand clutching her ribs, the other braced against the roof. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair plastered to her face. Sharp cheekbones. Eyes that even through the pain looked fierce and guarded. She wore a tailored black coat over what had probably been an expensive dress before the crash ruined it. "Can you move?" Caleb asked. She blinked at him, disoriented. "Who? Doesn't matter. Can you move?" "My ribs." Her voice was tight, controlled despite the pain. "I think something's broken." "Okay, stay still." He reached across her to check the driver. Pulse steady, breathing regular. The man stirred slightly but didn't wake. Caleb pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course not. They were in a dead zone, and the storm was killing what little coverage existed out here. "We need to get out," the woman said. "The engine." "I smell it." Gasoline. Faint but growing stronger. Caleb's mind raced. The nearest hospital was 20 miles. Nearest house was his, about 3 miles back. In this storm, an ambulance would take 30 minutes minimum, if he could even call one. "Can you walk?" "I don't know. We're about to find out." He slid one arm behind her shoulders, the other under her knees. She stiffened. "What are you—" "Getting you somewhere dry before this thing catches fire." He lifted her out of the seat as gently as he could. She gasped, pain lancing through her ribs, but she didn't scream. Caleb noticed that. Most people would have screamed. He carried her to the truck and set her in the passenger seat. She was lighter than he expected, all sharp angles and tense muscle. He went back for the driver. The man was heavier, dead weight, unconscious. Caleb got him into a fireman's carry and hauled him to the truck bed, laying him flat and covering him with the tarp he kept for equipment. Not ideal, but better than leaving him in a leaking SUV. By the time Caleb climbed back into the driver's seat, he was drenched and breathing hard. Water dripped from his jacket onto the floor mat. The woman stared at him. "You're taking us somewhere," she said. Not a question. "My place. It's close." He started the engine. "I'll call for help once we're there." "Why not leave us?" Caleb glanced at her. Rain streaked down the windshield between them. "Would you have?" She didn't answer. He drove. The 3 miles took 15 minutes. The roads were flooding fast, water pooling in the low spots where the drainage couldn't keep up. Caleb's house sat on a small rise just outside the town limits. A single-story rental with peeling paint and a roof that leaked in 2 places. Not much, but it was theirs. The porch light was on. Sophie must have asked Mrs. Chen to leave it on for him. Caleb parked and killed the engine. "Wait here." He went to the back and got the driver first, hauling the man up the porch steps and into the living room. Mrs. Chen appeared in the hallway, eyes wide. "Caleb, what?" "Car accident. Call 911. Tell them we need an ambulance." He laid the man on the couch and went back outside. The woman was trying to get out of the truck on her own. Stubborn. She had one foot on the running board, one hand pressed to her ribs, face tight with pain. "Stop," Caleb said. "I can walk." "No, you can't." He picked her up again. This time she didn't protest. He felt the tension in her body, the way she held herself rigid even while injured, like she was afraid to let someone else carry her weight. Inside, Mrs. Chen was on the phone with emergency services, giving directions in rapid Cantonese accented English. Caleb set the woman in the armchair near the fireplace. She winced as she settled into the cushions. "Dad?" Caleb turned. Sophie stood in the hallway in her pajamas, the ones with the cartoon stars that were getting too small for her. Her dark hair hung in 2 messy braids he'd done that morning before work. She looked at the strangers in their living room with wide, uncertain eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart," Caleb said. "There was an accident. These people needed help." Sophie's gaze moved to the woman in the chair. "Is she hurt?" "A little." The woman looked at Sophie. Something shifted in her expression. Just for a moment, the guardedness cracked. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "Thank you for asking." Mrs. Chen hung up. "Ambulance is coming. 20 minutes, maybe 30 with the roads." She pulled Caleb aside, lowering her voice. "You know who that is?" Caleb frowned. "What?" "That woman. That's Vivienne Laurent." The name meant nothing to him. Mrs. Chen gave him an exasperated look. "The billionaire, the tech CEO. She's all over the news." Mrs. Chen glanced toward the armchair. "Her company builds satellites or something. Very rich, very famous." Caleb looked back at the woman. Vivienne. She sat very still, watching the fire he'd left burning in the hearth that morning. Her face was pale, rain-damp hair sticking to her neck. She didn't look like the billionaire. She looked exhausted. "I'll make tea," Mrs. Chen muttered, heading for the kitchen. Caleb knelt beside the driver on the couch. The man's eyes fluttered open. He groaned. "Easy," Caleb said. "You're safe. Ambulance is coming." The man blinked, trying to focus. "Ms. Laurent?" "She's fine. Right over there." The driver turned his head, saw Vivienne, and relaxed slightly. "We hit something. I couldn't. The roads—" "You're lucky you're alive," Caleb said. "Both of you." The driver closed his eyes again. His breathing steadied. Caleb stood and moved to the armchair. Vivienne was still staring at the fire. Up close, he could see the faint tremor in her hands where they gripped the armrests. Shock, probably. Adrenaline wearing off. "How bad is the pain?" he asked. "Manageable." Her voice was flat, controlled. "I've had worse." "That's not an answer." What? She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Dark eyes taking in his worn work jacket, the grease still under his fingernails, the cheap digital watch on his wrist, reading him the way people do when they're used to measuring value. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Someone needed help." You didn't know who I was. Still don't, really. Her mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. Your neighbor seems to think I'm important. Are you? To some people. Sophie reappeared carrying a blanket. Her favorite, the one with the faded cartoon characters she'd had since she was 4. She held it out to Vivian. You're cold, Sophie said. Vivian stared at the blanket. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, carefully, she reached out and took it. Thank you, she said softly. Sophie nodded and retreated to stand beside Caleb. He put a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Chen returned with tea in mismatched mugs. She handed one to Vivian, who accepted it without comment. The firelight played across her face as she sipped, and Caleb saw something in her expression he recognized, the look of someone who'd been alone for too long. The ambulance arrived 40 minutes later. 2 paramedics in bright yellow rain gear came through the door with a stretcher and medical bags. They checked the driver first. Concussion, possible internal injuries. They loaded him onto the stretcher while the second paramedic examined Vivian. Broken rib, maybe 2, the paramedic said. We need to take you in for x-rays. I'm fine, Vivian said. Ma'am, you were just in a serious accident. I said I'm fine. There was steel in her voice now, the kind that made people stop arguing. The paramedic hesitated. Caleb crossed his arms. You can barely breathe without wincing. Go to the hospital. Vivian's eyes cut to him. I don't take orders. Wasn't an order, just common sense. They held each other's gaze. The paramedic looked between them, unsure. Finally, Vivian stood. She swayed slightly, catching herself on the armrest. The paramedic moved to help her, but she waved him off. Fine, she said. Let's go. As they led her toward the door, she paused and looked back. Her eyes found Caleb's. Thank you, she said, for stopping. Anyone would have. No, she said quietly. They wouldn't have. Then she was gone, guided out into the rain and into the waiting ambulance. The red and white light swept across the windows as it pulled away, fading into the storm. Mrs. Chen left shortly after, promising to check in tomorrow. Sophie yawned, rubbing her eyes. Is the pretty lady going to be okay? She asked. Yes, sweetheart, she'll be fine. Good. Sophie hugged him. I'm glad you helped her. Caleb kissed the top of her head. Me too. Now go back to bed. Oh. He got her settled, checked the door locks, and cleaned up the water tracked across the floor. By the time he collapsed into his own bed, it was past midnight. His clothes still smelled like rain and gasoline. He didn't think about Vivienne Laurent again until 3 days later when she showed up at his door. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Caleb had just gotten home from a long shift repairing a busted conveyor system at the lumberyard. His hands were raw, his back ached, and all he wanted was a beer and 20 minutes of silence before Sophie got home from school. Instead, he found a sleek black sedan parked in front of his house. Caleb frowned. Nobody he knew drove cars like that. He walked up the porch steps and found a woman standing by his door. She wore tailored gray slacks, a white blouse, and a long black coat that probably cost more than his truck. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. No bruises on her face, but she moved carefully, ribs still healing. Vivienne Laurent turned as he approached. Mr. Ryder, she said. Caleb stopped. How do you know my name? Ishki. Oh, I asked. She glanced at the house. May I come in? Why? To thank you properly. You already did. No, she said. I was in shock and barely coherent. That doesn't count. Caleb studied her. In the daylight without blood and rain, she looked different, sharper, more composed, the kind of person who was used to getting what they wanted. I don't need thanks, he said. I know. That's why I'm giving it. He unlocked the door. 10 minutes. I have to pick up my daughter. Inside, Vivian's gaze swept the living room, the sagging couch with the duct-taped cushion, the coffee table Caleb had built from scrap wood, Sophie's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a child's backpack on the floor. Everything clean but worn, held together by effort and stubborn pride. Vivian's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. Your neighbor told me you're a mechanic, she said. Industrial repair. I fix machinery, Sat. You're good at it? Good enough. She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. Thick, cream-colored paper. Expensive. She held it out. "What's that?" Caleb asked. "Gratitude." He didn't take it. "If that's money, keep it. It's a check. Enough to... I don't want your money." Vivian's hand didn't waver. "You saved my life. That has value. Not to me." "Then to me." Caleb crossed his arms. "Lady, I don't know what world you live in, but in mine, you help people because it's the right thing to do. Not because you expect a paycheck. Most people expect something. I'm not most people." They stood in silence. Rain tapped against the windows. Vivian slowly lowered the envelope. "Why not?" she asked. "Why not what? Why don't you want anything from me? Everyone wants something." "What?" Caleb shook his head. "I want you to leave so I can pick up my kid from school." Something flickered across her face. Not offense, something deeper, confusion maybe, like he'd spoken a language she didn't understand. She set the envelope on the coffee table. "Keep it, in case you change your mind." "I won't." Vivian moved toward the door, then paused. She looked at the drawings on the refrigerator, stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun, signed Sophie in crayon. "Your daughter," Vivian said. "How old?" 8. "She seems kind." "She is." Vivian's fingers brushed the doorframe. "You're lucky." "I know." She turned to face him. "I meant what I said. If you ever need anything..." "I won't." Vivian studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded and left. Caleb watched the sedan pull away. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and stared at the check inside. $25,000. More money than he'd made in the last year combined. He tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Sophie came home 20 minutes later with paint on her hands and a school project about butterflies. They ate spaghetti for dinner, the cheap kind from a box, and watched a nature documentary until bedtime. Normal. Routine. Safe. Caleb didn't tell her about the woman who'd come by. There was no reason to, but that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the look in Vivian Laurent's eyes when she'd seen Sophie's drawings, like she was seeing something precious she'd never had. He wondered what it was like to have everything and still feel empty. Then he stopped wondering, because it wasn't his problem, and billionaires didn't show up twice. Except 3 weeks later, she did. This time, Vivian came on a Saturday morning. Caleb was in the driveway changing the oil in his truck, while Sophie rode her bike in circles on the sidewalk. The same black sedan pulled up. The same woman stepped out, dressed more casually now, jeans, a sweater, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Sophie stopped pedaling. "Dad, it's the pretty lady." Caleb straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Go inside, Sophie." "But inside..." Sophie obeyed reluctantly, glancing back over her shoulder. Caleb waited until the door closed before walking to meet Vivian. "I thought I made myself clear," he said. "You did." Vivian removed her sunglasses. Her ribs had healed. She moved easier now. "I'm not here with money." "Then why are you here?" She hesitated. For the first time, Caleb saw uncertainty in her expression. "Because," she said slowly, "I haven't stopped thinking about this house." Caleb frowned. "What?" "The night of the accident. You brought me here. You had no reason to trust me, no reason to help, but you did. Your neighbor made tea. Your daughter gave me her blanket. You asked for nothing." Vivian's voice was quiet. "I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to understand why." "There's nothing to understand." There is." She looked at the house, the chipped paint, the patched roof. "I've lived in penthouses. I've had assistants and chefs and people whose entire job is to make my life easier. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And the night I sat in your living room with a broken rib and cheap tea was the first time in years I felt like a person instead of a portfolio." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Vivian met his eyes. "I want to understand how you do it." "Do what?" "Live like this, with so little, and still make it feel like enough." The words hit harder than Caleb expected. He thought about the late nights lying awake worrying about rent, the times he'd skipped meals so Sophie could have seconds, the constant grinding weight of keeping them afloat on fumes and willpower. It's not enough, he said quietly. It's just all I've got. Vivian stepped closer. Then let me help. No. Why not? Yeah. Because people like you don't help people like me without expecting something back. I don't care how nice you seem. I don't care how much money you have. The answer is no. Hurt flashed across her face. Real, unguarded hurt. She looked away. I'm not trying to buy you, she said. I'm trying to... She stopped. I don't know what I'm trying to do, and Caleb sighed. Look, I appreciate whatever this is, but I've got a life here. It's small, and it's hard, but it's mine. I don't need you complicating it. What if I'm not trying to complicate it? Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. What if I just want to be part of it? Before Caleb could respond, Sophie appeared on the porch. She'd ignored his instruction to stay inside, because of course she had. Are you okay? Sophie called to Vivian. Vivian turned. Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine. Your ribs don't hurt anymore? Not as much. Sophie walked down the steps. That's good. I was worried. Vivian crouched to Sophie's level, careful of her healing injuries. You were worried about me? Yeah. Dad said you got hurt in a car crash. Car crashes are scary. They are, Vivian agreed. But your dad helped me. He made it less scary. Sophie beamed. He's good at that. Caleb watched the exchange. The way Vivian's expression softened when she looked at his daughter. The way Sophie responded without fear or suspicion, like she could see something in this stranger that Caleb couldn't. Do you want to see my bike? Sophie asked. I'd love to. They walked to the sidewalk together. Sophie showed off her bike, a second-hand thing with scratched paint and mismatched training wheels Caleb had installed himself. To anyone else, it would have looked like junk. But Sophie rode it like it was a prize, and Vivian watched like she was seeing something miraculous. Caleb stood in the driveway, grease on his hands and doubt in his chest. He didn't know what Vivian Laurent wanted from him. But watching her smile at his daughter's enthusiasm, he began to suspect it was something money couldn't buy, and that scared him more than any offer of wealth ever could. Vivienne started coming by every Sunday. At first, Caleb told himself it wouldn't last. People like her didn't maintain interest in people like him. She'd get bored or busy, or remember she had a company to run in a world that didn't include oil-stained driveways and hand-me-down bicycles. But she kept showing up. The third Sunday, she brought coffee. Real coffee, the kind that came in cups with the cafe name printed on the side, not the instant crystals Caleb bought in bulk. Sophie was delighted. Caleb was suspicious. You don't have to keep doing this, he said, accepting the cup anyway because it smelled incredible. I know. Vivian sat on the porch steps beside him. She wore jeans again and a jacket that probably cost $1,000, but looked normal enough that Sophie didn't notice. I want to. Why? She took a sip of her own coffee. Because nobody expects me to. That wasn't an answer, but Caleb let it go. Sophie was already pulling Vivian toward the backyard to show her the tire swing he'd hung from the oak tree last summer. He watched them go, Vivian's careful steps across the uneven grass, Sophie's excited chatter filling the morning air. Mrs. Chen appeared at the fence separating their yards, pruning shears in hand and curiosity written all over her face. She's back again, Mrs. Chen said. Yeah. You know this is strange, right? A woman like that coming here every week. I know. What does she want? Caleb shook his head. I don't think she knows. Mrs. Chen snipped at a branch. Be careful, Caleb. Rich people don't do things without reasons. I'm always careful. But careful was getting harder. Because the fourth Sunday, Vivian helped Sophie with her math homework at the kitchen table while Caleb fixed dinner. The fifth Sunday, she stayed through lunch and told stories about traveling to places Sophie had only seen in picture books, places with names Caleb couldn't pronounce and prices he couldn't imagine. And by the sixth Sunday, Sophie started asking when Vivian was coming back before she'd even left. Caleb knew he should put a stop to it. This wasn't sustainable. Vivian had a life somewhere else, a real life with board meetings and private jets and problems that existed in tax brackets he'd never touch. Eventually, she'd leave. And when she did, Sophie would be the one hurt by it. But he didn't stop it. Because somewhere between the coffee and the homework help and the way Vivian laughed when Sophie told terrible knock-knock jokes, Caleb started to see past the money. He saw the loneliness. The way Vivian's phone would buzz with calls she'd ignore, her face going tight and distant for just a moment before Sophie pulled her back. The way she seemed more relaxed sitting on their worn couch than she probably ever did in whatever mansion she called home. The seventh Sunday, everything changed. It started normal enough. Vivian arrived mid-morning with pastries from a bakery downtown. Sophie immediately claimed the chocolate croissant. Caleb made coffee, his cheap instant kind, because Vivian never complained about it. They were sitting on the porch when Sophie asked the question. "Vivian, do you have any kids?" Vivian's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. The morning went very quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. "No," Vivian said carefully. "I don't. How come?" "Sophie," Caleb warned, but Vivian shook her head. "It's okay." She set down her cup. "I never found the right time, I suppose. I've been very focused on work." "Oh." Sophie swung her legs, considering this. "My mom didn't want to be a mom anymore. That's why she left." Caleb's chest tightened. Sophie rarely talked about Rachel. When she did, it was always with this matter-of-fact tone that broke his heart more than tears ever could. Vivian looked at Sophie with an expression Caleb had never seen on her face before, raw and aching and careful all at once. "That must have been very hard," Vivian said quietly. Sophie shrugged. "It was sad, but I have Dad, and he's the best." She said it with such simple confidence that Caleb had to look away. Vivian noticed. Her gaze moved to him, holding there for a beat too long before she turned back to Sophie. "Yes," Vivian said, "he is." After Sophie went inside to watch cartoons, Vivian stayed on the porch. Caleb could feel her working up to something. The air between them felt charged, like right before a storm breaks. "Can I tell you something?" Vivian asked. Caleb leaned against the railing. "Sure, miss." She took a breath. "I saw a doctor 2 years ago. There were some complications from a surgery I had in my 20s. Nothing life-threatening, but enough that getting pregnant would be extremely difficult. Maybe impossible." Caleb didn't say anything. He just listened. "I told myself it didn't matter," Vivian continued. "I had my company. I had my work. That was enough." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I convinced myself I didn't want children anyway, that it was a choice. But it wasn't. No." Her voice cracked slightly. "It wasn't." The vulnerability in her admission hit Caleb hard. This was the woman who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that moved millions of dollars. And she was sitting on his porch looking small and human and hurt. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." Vivian straightened her shoulders, rebuilding the walls he'd seen her drop. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand why I keep coming here. It's not pity. It's not charity. When I'm here, with you and Sophie, I feel like I'm part of something real, something that matters more than quarterly earnings or stock prices. Vivian, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." She stood to leave. Caleb caught her wrist, gentle but firm enough to stop her. "Stay for dinner," he said. She looked at him, surprised. "What?" "It's just spaghetti. Nothing fancy. But stay." Vivian's expression shifted. The careful mask slipped, and underneath was something that looked like hope. "Okay," she said. "I'd like that. Dinner was chaos. Sophie insisted on helping, which meant sauce splattered across the counter and noodles ended up in the sink. Vivian laughed, really laughed, not the polite chuckle she probably used in business meetings. She even tried to help clean up, though it was obvious she'd never washed dishes by hand in her life. "You're doing it wrong," Sophie informed her. "Am I? You have to scrub harder, see?" Sophie demonstrated with exaggerated motions. Vivian copied her, sleeves rolled up, hands in soapy water. Caleb watched from the doorway. The image didn't fit. A billionaire CEO doing dishes in his cramped kitchen while his daughter supervised. But somehow it worked. After Sophie went to bed, Vivian lingered. They sat on the porch in the cool evening air, not talking much, just existing in the comfortable silence that comes when words aren't necessary. "Thank you," Vivian said eventually. "For what?" "For letting me stay." for treating me like a person instead of a checkbook. Caleb turned to look at her. In the porch light, she looked younger than her years, less polished, more real. You make it sound like that's rare, he said. It is. She met his eyes. You have no idea how rare. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. Caleb felt it settle in his chest, warm and dangerous. I should go, Vivian said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Caleb agreed, but he didn't look away. The distance between them felt charged with possibility. Caleb knew he should step back, put space between them before this became something he couldn't control. But he didn't. Vivian stood first. Same time next week? If you want. I do. She walked to her car. Caleb watched until the taillights disappeared down the street. Then he went inside and lay awake for 2 hours trying not to think about the way she'd looked at him on the porch. This was a mistake. He knew it was a mistake. But he couldn't make himself care. The next Sunday, Vivian arrived with shadows under her eyes and tension in her shoulders. Something was wrong. Sophie noticed immediately. Are you okay? Sophie asked. Just tired, sweetheart. Work has been stressful. They went through the motions. Coffee, conversation, Sophie showing off a school project. But Vivian was distracted, her phone buzzing constantly in her pocket. Finally, she excused herself to take a call. Caleb found her in the backyard 20 minutes later, pacing near the tire swing with the phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was cold, clipped, nothing like the warm tone she used with Sophie. I don't care what the board thinks, Marcus. The answer is no. Pause. Because it's my company and I make the final decisions. Another pause, longer this time. Her jaw tightened. If they want to fight, they'll get one, but they won't win. She ended the call and stood very still, staring at nothing. Trouble? Caleb asked. Vivian startled slightly. She hadn't heard him approach. Nothing I can't handle. That didn't sound like nothing. Oh. She turned to face him. The mask was back, smooth and impenetrable. Just corporate politics, it's boring. Try me. For a moment he thought she'd deflect again. For a moment But then something in her expression crumbled, just a little. There are people in my company who think I've been distracted lately, she said. They're not wrong. I've been coming here instead of working 18-hour days, I've been ignoring calls, missing meetings. She laughed, but it sounded bitter. Apparently spending time with actual human beings instead of climbing over competitors makes me weak. That's garbage. Wu di chimshishis. That's business. Vivian crossed her arms. I built that company from nothing. I gave everything to it. My time, my relationships, my health. And now that I'm finally trying to have something that isn't work, they see it as a liability. Who's Marcus? My CFO. He's been with me for 8 years. I thought he was loyal. Her voice hardened. I was wrong. Caleb stepped closer. What's he trying to do? Undermine me. There's a board meeting in 2 weeks. He's gathering support to push me out of key decision-making. He can't remove me entirely. I own too much of the company. But he can make my life hell. Can you stop him? Maybe. If I go back to being the person I was before. If I sacrifice everything else and focus only on fighting. She looked at Caleb. But I don't want to be that person anymore. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Caleb wasn't sure he was ready to unpack. You shouldn't have to choose, he said. Everyone has to choose eventually. Between what? Being successful and being happy? Yes. Caleb shook his head. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Vivian blinked. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Really laughed. The sound bright and genuine despite everything. You're right, she said. It is stupid, but it's also true. Then change it. How? I don't know. You're the genius CEO. Figure it out. She smiled. It was small and tired, but real. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe everyone just convinced you it had to be complicated. Vivian studied him. Do you always see the world this clearly? No, I just don't have the luxury of overthinking. When you're broke and raising a kid alone, you focus on what matters. Everything else is noise. And what matters? Ye misa. The people you love, making sure they're safe, being there when they need you. He paused. Not sacrificing who you are to make other people rich. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and, without warning, wrapped her arms around him. Caleb froze. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him like this, tight and genuine and desperate. Rachel never had, even when things were good. His mother had died when he was 19. There'd been no one since. Slowly, carefully, he put his arms around Vivian and held her. She was shaking slightly, not crying, just trembling with the weight of whatever she'd been carrying alone. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" "For reminding me that I'm allowed to want more than just winning." They stood like that for a while, the autumn sun warm on their backs, Sophie's laughter drifting from somewhere inside the house. When Vivian finally pulled away, her eyes were bright but clear. "I need to go deal with this," she said, "but I'll be back, if that's okay." "It's okay." She started toward the house, then turned back. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "If things get complicated, and they might, will you trust me?" He didn't know what she meant by complicated, but looking at her standing there, vulnerable and determined, and more real than anyone he'd ever known, he found himself nodding. "Yeah," he said, "I'll trust you." Relief washed across her face. She squeezed his hand once, quick and warm, then went to say goodbye to Sophie. After she left, Mrs. Chen appeared at the fence again. "That looked serious," she said. "It was." "You're falling for her." Caleb didn't answer, didn't need to. Mrs. Chen had known him long enough to read the truth. "Be careful," she said again. "When people from different worlds try to mix, someone always gets hurt." "I know." "Do you?" Caleb thought about the way Vivian had felt in his arms, the way Sophie lit up whenever she arrived, the way his chest had started to ache when Sunday mornings came around and he caught himself watching the street for her car. "No," he admitted. "Probably not." Mrs. Chen sighed. "Just protect that little girl. Whatever happens between you and the billionaire, make sure Sophie doesn't pay the price." "I will." But even as he said it, Caleb wondered if it was already too late. The following week crawled by. Vivian didn't call, didn't text. Sunday came, and Caleb found himself watching the clock like a teenager waiting for a prom date. Sophie asked 3 times if Vivian was coming. Each time, Caleb said he didn't know. By noon, he'd accepted she wasn't showing up. Something had changed. Maybe Marcus had won. Maybe she'd realized coming here every week was a fantasy she couldn't afford. He was making sandwiches when the doorbell rang. Sophie ran to answer it before he could stop her. Through the kitchen window, Caleb saw the black sedan in the driveway. His heart did something stupid in his chest. But when Sophie opened the door, her expression fell. "You're not Vivian," she said. A man in a dark suit stood on the porch. Late 50s, gray hair, expensive watch. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, I'm not. Is your father home?" Caleb came to the door, putting himself between Sophie and the stranger. "Can I help you?" The man's smile widened. "Mr. Ryder, I'm Marcus Vance. I work with Vivian Laurent. May I come in?" Every instinct Caleb had screamed no. But he stepped aside because saying no to a man like this would only make things worse. Marcus walked into the living room like he owned it. His gaze swept the space, cataloging, judging, calculating. Sophie retreated to the hallway, watching with wide eyes. "Go to your room, sweetheart," Caleb said. "But now, Sophie..." She obeyed reluctantly, glancing back over her shoulder as she disappeared down the hall. Caleb waited until he heard her door close before turning to Marcus. "Say what you came to say." Marcus settled into the armchair, the same one Vivian had sat in the night of the accident. The symmetry felt wrong. "Miss Laurent has been coming here quite frequently," Marcus said. "I'm concerned." "Concerned about what?" "About her judgment. Vivian is a brilliant woman, but she can be impulsive, emotional. She forms attachments that aren't always in her best interest." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "Get to the point." "The point, Mr. Ryder, is that you're a distraction, a dangerous one. While Vivian has been playing house with you and your daughter, her company has been suffering, decisions delayed, meetings missed, competitors gaining ground. Marcus leaned forward. I'm here to ask you to end this. End what? She's been coming over for Sunday dinners. That's it. Is it? Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Caleb. This was taken 3 days ago. Patrus Abasi. It was a photo. Vivian and Caleb on the porch, the night she'd hugged him. The angle made it look intimate, like something more than comfort between friends. Who took that? Caleb demanded. Does it matter? What matters is how it looks. Vivian Laurent, one of the most powerful women in tech, romantically involved with a struggling mechanic who can barely keep a roof over his daughter's head. The optics are terrible. We're not romantically involved. Beat par les mêmes chomps. Yet. Marcus pocketed the phone. But you'd like to be, wouldn't you? I can see it on your face. You're already halfway in love with her. Caleb said nothing. He didn't trust himself to speak without his voice betraying him. Marcus stood. I'm going to make this very simple. You have something Vivian wants. Simplicity, normalcy, whatever fantasy she's constructed around your little domestic life. But you need something too. Money, security, a better future for your daughter. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. It was thicker than the one Vivian had left weeks ago. $50,000, Marcus said. In exchange, you stop seeing Vivian. You tell her it's not appropriate anymore. You make it clean and final. Caleb stared at the envelope. $50,000. He could pay off his truck, fix the roof, put Sophie in a better school, set aside money for college. All the things he lay awake worrying about could disappear with one signature. And if I say no, he asked, then I make your life very difficult. Vivian may think she's untouchable, but you're not. Code violations, health inspections, custody reviews, there are a dozen ways to pressure someone in your position. I'd prefer not to resort to that. But I will, if you force my hand. Whoa. Basam. The threat hung in the air between them, ugly and real. Caleb thought about Sophie in her room, probably listening through the door. About the life they'd built here, small and fragile and easily destroyed by men with power and money and no conscience. He looked at Marcus Vance and saw everything he'd spent his life avoiding, the cruelty that came with wealth, the casual way powerful people crushed anyone in their path. Get out, Caleb said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Mr. Ryder, I'm offering you. I don't care what you're offering. I don't care about your threats. And I'm sure as hell not going to let you bribe me into hurting someone I care about. Caleb stepped forward. Now leave before I throw you out. Marcus's pleasant expression evaporated. The smile turned cold, calculated. You're making a mistake, he said. Wouldn't be my first. Yeah. Marcus walked to the door, then paused. Vivian will realize eventually that you're not worth the trouble. Men like you always disappoint women like her. It's just a matter of time. Maybe, but at least I won't be the one who sold her out for money. Marcus left without another word. Caleb watched the sedan pull away, his hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. Sophie emerged from the hallway. What did that man want? She asked. Nothing good. Caleb pulled her into a hug. But he's gone now. Was he mean to you? Yes, sweetheart. He was. Sophie hugged him tighter. I don't like him. Me neither. That night, Caleb's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Caleb? Vivian's voice, strained and tired. I just heard what Marcus did. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Yes, it is. I should have known he'd try something like this. I should have protected you. I don't need protection. He threatened you. I've dealt with worse. There was a long pause. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was raw. What did you tell him? To go to hell. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob came through the phone. You turned down $50,000. Yeah. Why? Caleb sat on the porch steps, phone pressed to his ear, staring out at the dark street. Because some things aren't for sale. Another pause, then, I'm coming over. Vivian, it's late. I don't care. I need to see you. She hung up before he could argue. 20 minutes later, the sedan pulled into the driveway. But this time, Vivian was driving. No security, no assistant. Just her. She got out of the car and walked straight to him. In the porch light, he could see she'd been crying. "He offered you money to leave me," she said. "Yes." "And you said no." "Yes. Even though you need it. Even though it would make your life easier, see." Caleb stood. "Vivienne, no one has ever chosen me over money. No one. Do you understand that? Every relationship I've had, every friendship, every partnership, at some point, someone always takes the money." She was shaking. Caleb reached for her, pulling her close. She gripped his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being alone in a world full of people who only want what I can give them. You're not alone, aren't I?" Caleb pulled back just enough to look at her. "No, you're not." Their faces were close, too close. Caleb could count her eyelashes, see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. The air between them felt electric. "This is a bad idea," Vivian said. "Probably. We're from completely different worlds." "I know. People will try to destroy us. Let them try." Vivian kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and real, and full of all the things neither of them had been brave enough to say out loud. Caleb kissed her back, his hands in her hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian's eyes were wide. "I didn't come here for that," she said. "I know. But I'm not sorry. Neither am I." She laughed, breathless and amazed. "What are we doing?" "I have no idea. This is going to be complicated." "Yeah, it is." Vivian touched his face, her thumb brushing his cheekbone. "I meant what I said before. If this gets dangerous, I trust you," Caleb said. "We'll figure it out." She kissed him again, softer this time. When she pulled away, she was smiling. "I should go," she said, "before I wake Sophie." She'd be thrilled. "I know, but I want to do this right. I want to tell her together, when the time is right." Caleb nodded. "Okay, in this go." Vivian walked to her car. Before getting in, she turned back. "Marcus won't stop." "I know. This is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know that too." "And you're still sure?" Caleb thought about everything waiting for them. The media scrutiny, the corporate warfare, the clash between their worlds. He thought about how much easier it would be to walk away now, before things got messier. Then he thought about the way Vivian had looked holding Sophie's blanket the night of the accident, the way she laughed at terrible knock-knock jokes, the way she'd hugged him in the backyard like he was the only solid thing in her tilting world. "Yeah," he said. "I'm sure." Vivian smiled. "Then we'll fight." She drove away. Caleb stood on the porch long after the taillights disappeared, his heart racing and his head spinning. This was going to change everything. He knew it, felt it in his bones. But for the first time in years, Caleb wasn't afraid of change. He was ready for it. The photograph appeared online 3 days later. Caleb was at work, elbow deep in a broken hydraulic press, when his phone started buzzing. First one call, then another. By the third, he pulled off his gloves and checked the screen. "Mrs. Chen." He answered. "Have you seen the internet?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "I'm working. What's going on?" They have pictures of you and Vivian. They're everywhere." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What kind of pictures?" "The kiss. Someone photographed you kissing her on your porch. It's all over the news sites. They're calling you—" She paused. "They're not being kind, Caleb." He ended the call and searched his own name. The results loaded instantly. Dozens of articles, all posted within the last hour. The headlines made his chest tight. Billionaire CEO's secret romance with struggling mechanic. Vivian Laurent spotted with mystery man. Is she being manipulated? What's? Gold digger or real love? Inside Laurent's shocking relationship. The photo was clear, too clear. Him and Vivian on the porch, her hands in his hair, the kiss captured in perfect detail. Someone had been watching, waiting, and now the whole world was watching too. Caleb's phone rang again. Vivian this time. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I should have known they'd be watching the house. I should have been more careful. It's done now. Are you okay? Caleb looked at the article on his screen, at the comments section already filling with strangers dissecting his life, his choices, his worth. Not really. I'm handling it. My PR team is drafting a statement. We'll control the narrative before it gets worse. Vivian, I don't think you can control this. I can try. Her voice cracked slightly. I won't let them destroy you over this. But they were already trying. By lunchtime, reporters had found his address. 3 of them waited outside the house when Caleb got home early, cameras ready. He pushed past them without comment, locked the door, and called Mrs. Chen to keep Sophie at her place until the crowd dispersed. It didn't disperse. By evening, there were 7 reporters. By the next morning, a news van had parked across the street. Sophie couldn't go to school without running a gauntlet of cameras and shouted questions. Caleb called in sick to work and kept her home, watching through the curtains as strangers picked apart their lives for entertainment. Vivian came over that night after the reporters finally left, slipping through the back gate Mrs. Chen had unlocked for her. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a hoodie instead of her usual polished clothes. This is insane, Caleb said. I know. Vivian sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. Marcus leaked the photo. I'm sure of it. He's trying to make this look like a scandal to undermine me before the board meeting. Is it working? Probably. She looked up at him. The board meets in 1 week. If they think I'm unstable, distracted, making poor decisions because of a relationship, they'll vote to limit my authority. Marcus will effectively control the company. What can we do? Or say? Oh. What can... I don't know yet. My lawyers are looking for proof that he leaked the photo, but even if we find it, the damage is done. The story is out there. People love this kind of thing. The rich woman and the poor man, all the class warfare implications. It's a media circus. Caleb sat across from her. So what do we do? Hide? Sat across from. Pretend this isn't happening? We could stop seeing each other. Publicly, I mean. Let the story die down. Bossmate, this shikitatum. The words hung between them. Caleb felt the weight of them, the surrender they represented. Is that what you want? He asked. Vivian's eyes met his. No, but I don't want to keep hurting you either. You didn't sign up for this. Neither did Sophie. As if summoned, Sophie appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Why are there people with cameras outside? No. Vivian and Caleb exchanged looks. They'd been putting off this conversation, waiting for the right moment. Apparently the right moment had arrived whether they were ready or not. Come here, sweetheart, Caleb said. Sophie climbed into his lap. She was getting too big for this, all long limbs and sharp elbows, but she still fit against his chest the way she had when she was small. You know how Vivian has been coming over on Sundays? Caleb started. Yeah, us. Well, we've become very close, more than friends. Sophie looked between them. Like boyfriend and girlfriend? Sort of, yeah. A slow smile spread across Sophie's face. Really? Vivian leaned forward. How would you feel about that, Sophie? Are you kidding? That's awesome. Sophie's excitement was so pure, so immediate, that both adults felt something crack open in their chests. Does this mean you'll come over more? Can we do more stuff together? Maybe, Vivian said carefully. But there's something you need to understand. Some people aren't happy about your dad and me being together. That's why there are reporters outside. They're going to write stories about us, and some of those stories might not be very nice. Sophie's smile faded. Why would people be mean about it? Because I have a lot of money and your dad doesn't. Some people think that means we shouldn't be together. That's stupid. Yeah, Caleb agreed. It is. Sophie thought about this, her face serious in the way it got when she was working through something complicated. Are you going to stop seeing each other because of the mean people? Vivian looked at Caleb. He saw the question in her eyes, the fear that maybe they should. Maybe it would be easier. No, Caleb said firmly. We're not. Relief washed over Vivian's face. Sophie hugged him tight. Good, Sophie said. I like Vivian. I don't want her to go away. I'm not going anywhere. Vivian promised. Not if I can help it. But helping it was getting harder. The next day, someone published Caleb's financial records. He had no idea how they'd gotten them. Probably paid off someone at the bank. But suddenly, his debt, his income, his late payments, and overdraft fees were public knowledge. The articles painted him as desperate, opportunistic, a man who'd prey on a vulnerable woman for her money. Then they found Rachel. Caleb's ex-wife gave an interview to a tabloid, claiming he'd been controlling and difficult to live with. She painted herself as a victim who'd escaped a bad situation, conveniently leaving out the part where she'd abandoned their daughter without a fight for custody. The interview ran with old photos, Caleb looking angry in one shot, tired in another, the pictures chosen to make him seem unstable. She's lying, Caleb told Vivian over the phone. Half that stuff never happened. I know. People are going to believe her. Some will, but the people who matter won't. Caleb wasn't sure who the people who mattered were anymore. His boss at the lumberyard had started giving him strange looks. Neighbors he'd known for years crossed the street to avoid talking to him. Even Mrs. Chen seemed uncertain, like she wasn't sure which version of Caleb Ryder was real, the quiet single father she'd known, or the opportunistic manipulator the media described. The only constant was Sophie and Vivian. Vivian started coming over every evening after work, sometimes not leaving until after midnight. They'd sit on the porch or at the kitchen table, talking through strategies, reading the latest articles, trying to figure out how to survive this. She brought her laptop and worked remotely, making calls to lawyers and PR specialists while Caleb made dinner and helped Sophie with homework. It felt domestic, real, like they were building something together despite the chaos swirling around them. But the chaos was getting worse. 4 days before the board meeting, Caleb got a call from Sophie's school. The principal wanted to see him immediately. He drove over with a sense of dread, knowing this wouldn't be good. Principal Morrison was a thin woman in her 50s with kind eyes that currently looked apologetic. Mr. Ryder, thank you for coming in. What's wrong? Is Sophie okay? Sophie is fine, but we've had some concerns from other parents. She folded her hands on her desk. About the media attention. Several families have complained that reporters are showing up at drop-off and pickup, trying to get photographs and asking questions. It's disruptive. Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I'm doing everything I can to... I understand this isn't your fault, but I need to ask if there's any way to minimize the disruption. Perhaps keeping Sophie home for a few days until things calm down. You're asking me to pull my daughter out of school because other parents are uncomfortable? I'm asking you to consider what's best for Sophie and for the other students. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to point out that punishing his kid for something she had no control over was wrong. But looking at Principal Morrison's apologetic expression, he knew she was in an impossible position too. Fine, he said. I'll keep her home this week. I think that's wise. And Mr. Ryder, for what it's worth, I hope this situation resolves itself soon. Caleb drove home in silence, anger and helplessness warring in his chest. When he told Sophie she couldn't go back to school yet, she cried. Not because she loved school so much, but because she understood what it meant. She was being punished for his choices. That night, Vivian found Caleb sitting on the porch long after Sophie had gone to bed. She sat beside him without a word, her hand finding his. She can't go to school, Caleb said quietly. Other parents complained. Vivian's hand tightened. I'm sorry. She's 8 years old. She didn't do anything wrong, but she's the one paying for this. I know. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I'm not worth the trouble. Vivian turned to face him, her eyes fierce. Don't you dare say that. Don't let them make you believe you're not good enough. Look at what's happening, Vivian. My kid can't go to school. My ex-wife is selling lies about me. Strangers think they know everything about my life based on my bank account. All because I... He stopped. Because you what? Because I fell for someone I had no business falling for. Vivian's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Caleb hadn't meant to. The words had just come out, raw and true. You fell for me, Vivian said softly. Yeah, I did. She kissed him, slow and deep and full of all the things words couldn't express. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I fell for you too," she whispered. "The night you pulled me out of that car, I thought you were just being decent. But you kept being decent. You kept seeing me as a person instead of a walking checkbook. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that?" "A reason to want more than just winning." Caleb pulled her close, her head resting against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, holding on to each other while the world tried to tear them apart. "The board meeting is in 3 days," Vivian said eventually. "After that, things will either get better or much, much worse." "What's the play?" "I'm going to expose Marcus. I have forensic accountants going through the company books. If he's been embezzling or taking kickbacks, and I think he has, I'll have proof. I'll present it at the meeting and destroy his credibility before he can destroy mine. And if you can't find proof," Vivian was quiet, "then I lose. The board limits my power. Marcus takes control, and everything I built gets twisted into something I don't recognize." "Must beat what just some beats." "What happens to us?" She lifted her head to look at him. "That depends on you. If I lose the company, I lose most of my resources. The media will say you left me once the money was gone. They'll call it proof you were using me all along. I don't care what they call it. You should. It'll follow you forever. It'll follow Sophie." Caleb thought about that, about the years ahead carrying the label of gold digger or opportunist everywhere he went. Job applications, background checks, Sophie's future relationships. The stain would spread into everything. "I still don't care," he said. "I'd rather be called names and have you than be left alone with a clean reputation." Vivian kissed him again. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both." She laughed, the sound breaking through the heavy weight of everything else. "Probably." 2 days before the board meeting, the forensic accountants found it. Marcus had been skimming money through shell companies for 3 years, hiding it in offshore accounts. Not enough to bankrupt the company, but enough to prove fraud. Vivian's lawyers built an airtight case overnight, but Marcus had one more card to play. The morning before the meeting, Caleb got a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Ryder." Marcus Vance's smooth voice made Caleb's skin crawl. "I'm calling to offer you one final chance. Not interested. Hear me out. Tomorrow, Vivian is going to present evidence of financial misconduct at the board meeting. She thinks she's won. But what she doesn't know is that I have evidence too." Caleb's stomach tightened. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that proves you're exactly what everyone thinks you are. Bank transfers, emails, a pattern of financial requests that paint a very clear picture of a man manipulating a vulnerable woman for money." "That's bullshit. I never asked her for anything." "Are you sure?" "Because I have records showing Vivian transferred $5,000 to your account 2 weeks ago, and another $10,000 the week before that." "Funny, since you claimed you didn't want her money." Caleb's blood ran cold. Those transfers didn't happen." "They did. Or at least they will have happened by the time I present the evidence tomorrow. Forged, of course, but very convincing. The board will see a struggling mechanic systematically draining resources from their CEO. They'll vote to remove her immediately, citing her compromised judgment." "You're insane." "I'm practical, and I'm giving you a way out. Walk away from Vivian today, publicly. Tell her it was all a mistake. Do that, and I'll make the evidence disappear. You go back to your quiet life, and Vivian keeps her company. And if I don't, then tomorrow I destroy both of you. She loses the company. You get exposed as a con artist. Your daughter grows up knowing her father was a thief. Is that really what you want?" The line went dead. Caleb stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. The trap was perfect. If he stayed with Vivian, Marcus would present forged evidence that made Caleb look like a criminal. The board would turn on Vivian, the media would crucify them both, and Sophie would carry that stigma for the rest of her life. But if he left, Vivian would think he'd abandoned her right when she needed him most. She'd face the board meeting alone, probably win based on the real evidence she had, but she'd lose him. She'd lose the one person who'd chosen her over money. Either way, someone got hurt. Caleb called Vivian immediately. She answered on the first ring. We have a problem, he said. He told her everything. The forged evidence, Marcus's ultimatum, the impossible choice. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. He's bluffing, Vivian said finally. What if he's not? Then we fight it. We prove the transfers are fake. We expose him for the fraud he is. That could take months, years. And in the meantime, Sophie has to live with everyone thinking her dad is a criminal. Caleb, maybe I should walk away. Just for now. Just until the board meeting is over and you've secured your position. Then we can... No. Vivian's voice was sharp. If you walk away now, Marcus wins. He'll know he can manipulate us by threatening the people we love. It won't stop with this board meeting. It'll never stop. So what do? We call his bluff. Tomorrow at the board meeting, I present my evidence of his fraud. If he tries to present forged evidence against you, we tear it apart in front of everyone. We fight, Caleb. Together. And if we lose, then we lose together. But at least we'll lose on our terms. Caleb closed his eyes. Every instinct he had screamed at him to protect Sophie, to take the safe route, to accept Marcus's offer and disappear. But he thought about what that would teach her. That you run when things get hard, that you sacrifice the people you love to save yourself. Okay, he said. We fight. The next morning, Caleb dropped Sophie at Mrs. Chen's house with instructions to keep her inside no matter what happened. Then he put on the only suit he owned, a cheap black thing he'd bought for his mother's funeral, and drove to the city with Vivian. The Laurent Technologies headquarters was a glass tower in downtown Portland, all sleek lines and modern architecture. Caleb had never been anywhere like it. Security guards, marble floors, people in expensive suits hurrying past with tablets and important expressions. Vivian led him to a conference room on the 20th floor. The board was already assembled, 12 men and women in their 50s and 60s, all watching Caleb with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, his expression calm and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, Vivian began, standing at the head of the table, thank you for convening on short notice. I've called this meeting to address concerns about my leadership and to present evidence of fraud within our executive team. She laid out the case methodically. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the pattern of embezzlement spanning 3 years. Her lawyers distributed documents, highlighted transactions, built an irrefutable chain of evidence pointing directly at Marcus Vance. Marcus listened without expression. When Vivian finished, he stood. Everything Ms. Laurent has presented is accurate, he said calmly. I did create those accounts. I did move that money, and I did it to protect this company from its greatest liability, her. What murmurs rippled through the board. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Explain. Gladly. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out his own folder. Over the past 6 months, Vivian has been increasingly distracted and erratic. She's been missing meetings, delaying crucial decisions, and spending significant company resources on personal matters. I became concerned, so I hired a private investigator. He slid photographs across the table, images of Vivian at Caleb's house, at the park with Sophie, sitting on the porch, each one time-stamped during business hours. While we were negotiating a $50 million satellite contract, our CEO was playing house with a mechanic and his daughter. While competitors gained market share, she was distracted by a romantic fantasy. I moved company funds to protect them from misappropriation until such time as Miss Laurent could be removed from day-to-day operations. That's a lie, Vivian said. You stole from the company for personal gain. Did I? Marcus smiled. Then explain these. He pulled out new documents, bank statements, transfer records, everything showing exactly what he'd described on the phone. Payments from Vivian's accounts to Caleb's. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. A pattern of financial support that looked damning. Those are forged, Caleb said, standing. I never received money from Vivian, ever. Marcus turned to him. Mr. Ryder, I'm sure this is difficult for you, but the evidence is clear. Miss Laurent has been supporting you financially while neglecting her duties to this company. One of the board members, a woman with steel gray hair, spoke up. Ms. Laurent, is this true? Have you been transferring funds to Mr. Ryder? No, Vivian said firmly. Those documents are fake. They're certified by 3 separate banks, Marcus countered. Are you claiming all 3 are lying? The trap snapped shut. Caleb could see it in the board members' faces. The doubt, the concern, the slow shift from supporting Vivian to questioning her judgment. I have a question, Caleb said. All eyes turned to him. Mr. Vance, you said you hired a private investigator to follow Vivian. When did you hire them? Marcus frowned. I don't see how that's relevant. Humor me. When? 6 months ago. Before or after Vivian's car accident? A pause. After. Interesting. Because that accident happened 4 months ago. You hired an investigator 2 months before Vivian and I ever met. Why would you need to follow her if there was nothing suspicious happening yet? Marcus's confidence faltered. Just a flicker, but it was there. Vivian picked up the thread. Unless you already knew about the accident. Because you caused it. That's absurd, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its smooth assurance. Is it? I've had my own investigators looking into the crash. The brake line was cut, professionally, and the mechanic who inspected the car afterward received a $50,000 payment from one of your shell companies 3 days later. She pulled out her own documentation. The board members leaned in, comparing Marcus's evidence with Vivian's. The room fell silent except for the rustle of papers. The gray-haired board member looked up. Mr. Vance, did you orchestrate Miss Laurent's car accident? Of course not. Then explain the payment to the mechanic. I can't. I don't know anything about it. But it came from your account. Marcus's composure cracked. You can't prove... Yes, we can, Vivian said quietly. We have emails, phone records, testimony from the mechanic himself, who's willing to cooperate in exchange for immunity. You tried to kill me, Marcus, and when that didn't work, you tried to discredit me instead. The room erupted, board members shouting questions, Marcus denying everything, lawyers making calls. In the chaos, Caleb found Vivian's hand under the table and squeezed. Security escorted Marcus out 15 minutes later. He was still protesting, still insisting the evidence was circumstantial, but nobody was listening anymore. The board called an emergency vote. Within an hour, they'd confirmed Vivian's full authority and begun proceedings to press criminal charges against Marcus Vance. When it was over, Vivian and Caleb stood in her office overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the buildings gold and orange. We won, Vivian said, sounding almost surprised. Yeah, we did. She turned to him. He tried to kill me, and then he tried to destroy both of us, all because he wanted control of a company. People do terrible things for power, but we stopped him. She moved closer, together. Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding tight. They'd survived. Against every odd, every threat, every attempt to tear them apart, they'd survived. But as he held Vivian and looked out at the city below, Caleb knew this was just the beginning. The board meeting was over, but the real world was still waiting. The media, the public opinion, the vast gulf between their lives that hadn't gone anywhere just because they'd won one battle. The hard part was still ahead. They stopped for coffee on the drive back, pulling into a small cafe on the outskirts of the city where nobody would recognize either of them. Caleb's hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, from watching Marcus's face crumble as the board turned on him, from the weight of how close they'd come to losing everything. Vivian ordered for both of them, something complicated with foam that Caleb wouldn't have known how to pronounce. They sat in a corner booth, steam rising from their cups, the reality of what had just happened settling over them like dust after an explosion. I need to tell you something, Vivian said, her fingers wrapped around her cup. Before Marcus got escorted out, he looked at me, and you know what I saw in his eyes? Anger? No, nothing. Like I wasn't even a person to him. Just an obstacle. She took a shaky breath. He tried to kill me, Caleb. Not out of passion or rage, just cold calculation. Because I was in the way of something he wanted. Caleb reached across the table, covering her hand with his. He's gone now. He can't hurt you anymore. Can't he? The criminal case will take months, maybe years. His lawyers are already calling mine, talking about plea deals and settlements. There's a chance he never sees the inside of a prison cell. But he lost the company. Did he, though? He'll sell his shares, probably make millions. He'll write a book, do interviews, play the victim. Men like Marcus always land on their feet. Vivian's voice was bitter. Meanwhile, I'm the CEO who almost got murdered by her own CFO. That's the story people will tell. Not that I survived, not that I won, just that I was stupid enough not to see it coming. You're not stupid. I trusted him for 8 years. I gave him access to everything. I never once questioned his loyalty. She pulled her hand away, wrapping both arms around herself. What does that make me? Human, Caleb said. It makes you human. They sat in silence. Through the cafe window, Caleb could see normal people living normal lives. A woman pushing a stroller, a teenager on a skateboard, a couple holding hands, none of them aware that 20 miles away, a billionaire had just escaped an assassination attempt and exposed a conspiracy at a board meeting. What happens now? Caleb asked. Vivian looked at him. What do you want to happen? I want to go home, pick up Sophie, make dinner, watch her do her homework, pretend for one night that we're just regular people. We can't pretend anymore, not after today. The press conference is in 2 hours. My lawyers want me to address the Marcus situation publicly, control the narrative before someone else does. So address it. They don't want me to mention you. They think it'll muddy the story, make it about the romance instead of the fraud. Vivian's eyes searched his face. They want me to act like you don't exist. Caleb felt the words hit his chest. Not with surprise, he'd known this was coming, but with the dull ache of confirmation. And what do you want? He asked. Vivian set down her coffee cup. I want to tell the truth. I want to stand in front of those cameras and say that yes, I'm in love with a mechanic who makes 1/10 of what my assistant makes. That he saved my life, and I saved his, and none of that has anything to do with Marcus's crimes. But my lawyers say that's naive. They say I'll get eaten alive. They're probably right. So what? I let them erase you? Act like the past 3 months never happened? Okay, If that's what it takes to protect you, so stop. Vivian's voice was sharp. Stop trying to protect me by disappearing. I've had people disappear from my life my whole life. Friends who couldn't handle the money. Family who only called when they needed something. Employees who kissed up and then stabbed me in the back. I will not lose you that way. Then what do you want me to do? Be there. At the press conference. Stand beside me. Let them see that I'm not ashamed of you. Of us. Caleb thought about what that would mean. The cameras, the questions, the dissection of every aspect of his life, broadcast to millions. Sophie watching her father on the news, hearing strangers debate whether he was worthy of love. Okay, he said. Vivian blinked. Okay? Just like that? You asked what I wanted. I want you. If standing next to you at a press conference is part of that, then yeah. Okay. What? She kissed him across the table, coffee-flavored and desperate and real. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. I don't deserve you, she whispered. Yeah, you do. You just forgot what you deserved because everyone around you was telling you the wrong things. They finished their coffee and drove to Laurent Technologies. The press conference was set up in the main lobby. A podium with microphones, cameras on tripods, reporters already gathering with their notebooks and recorders. Caleb stood backstage with Vivian's PR team, a woman named Jennifer, who kept giving him nervous looks like he might spontaneously combust and ruin everything. You don't have to say anything, Jennifer told him for the 3rd time. Just stand there and look supportive. If anyone asks you a direct question, defer to Vivian. Got it. And try not to look so... She gestured vaguely at his face. So what? Angry. You look angry. I am angry. Well, try to look less angry. Smile. Look like you're happy to be here. Caleb didn't point out that he wasn't happy to be there. That standing in front of cameras while strangers judged his worth was somewhere between a root canal and a colonoscopy on his list of preferred activities. But he smiled anyway, tight and fake, and Jennifer sighed like it was the best she was going to get. Vivian walked out to the podium at exactly 6 o'clock. The camera flashes started immediately, a strobe of white light that made Caleb's eyes hurt. He stayed to the side, just visible in frame, hands clasped in front of him like he was at a funeral. "Good evening," Vivian began. "I'm here to address recent developments at Laurent Technologies. This afternoon, our board of directors voted unanimously to terminate Chief Financial Officer Marcus Vance following an investigation into financial fraud and criminal conspiracy." The reporters erupted with questions. Vivian held up a hand. "I'll take questions in a moment. First, I want to be clear about the facts. Mr. Vance orchestrated an attempt on my life 4 months ago when he arranged for my vehicle to be sabotaged. When that attempt failed, he engaged in a systematic campaign to undermine my authority and steal from this company. He has been removed from all positions, his assets have been frozen, and criminal charges are being filed." More questions, louder now. Vivienne pointed to a reporter in front. "Miss Laurent, can you confirm reports that this is related to your personal relationship with Caleb Ryder?" Every camera swung toward Caleb. He felt his face go hot, his shoulders tense. Vivienne's expression didn't change. "Mr. Ryder saved my life the night of the accident. We've since developed a personal relationship. That relationship had no bearing on Marcus Vance's criminal actions." "But isn't it true that Vance tried to pay Mr. Ryder to leave you? That he saw the relationship as a distraction? Marcus Vance saw everything as a means to an end. Yes, he attempted to bribe Mr. Ryder. Mr. Ryder refused. That should tell you everything you need to know about his character." Another reporter stood. "There are allegations that you've been transferring money to Mr. Ryder. Can you address those?" "Those allegations are based on forged documents that Marcus Vance fabricated. They've been thoroughly debunked." Next question. "Ms. Laurent, how can you expect the public to believe that a relationship between a billionaire CEO and an unemployed mechanic—" "He's not unemployed," Vivian interrupted, her voice sharp. "He's a skilled industrial technician who works 60-hour weeks to support his daughter. And I don't expect the public to believe anything. I'm simply stating facts. Whether people choose to believe them is their decision." Caleb watched her face the cameras with the same fierce determination she'd shown in the boardroom. But he could see the cost. The tightness around her eyes, the controlled breathing, the way her hand gripped the podium edge. A female reporter in back raised her hand. "Miss Laurent, are you in love with Caleb Ryder?" The room went silent. Caleb's heart stopped. This wasn't a business question. This was personal, intimate, designed to make her stumble. Vivian looked directly at the camera. "Yes, I am." The flashes intensified. Reporters shouted follow-ups. Jennifer looked like she might faint, and Caleb felt something crack open in his chest, something warm and terrifying and inevitable. Vivian pointed to another reporter. "Next question about the fraud case, please." They kept going for 30 more minutes. Questions about Marcus, about the company, about the investigation. And through it all, Vivian kept pivoting back to facts, to evidence, to the truth. When it finally ended, she walked off the stage without looking at the cameras. Caleb followed. Backstage, Jennifer was waiting with her phone pressed to her ear and panic written across her face. "The clip already has 2 million views," she hissed at Vivian. "You just declared your love on live television. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to your image?" "I don't care about my image." "Well, you should. You're trending #1 on 3 platforms. The conservative outlets are calling it a publicity stunt. The liberal ones are calling it a fairy tale. Everyone has an opinion about your personal life." "Then they can keep their opinions," Vivian said. She turned to Caleb. "Let's go get Sophie." They drove to Mrs. Chen's house in tense silence. When they arrived, Mrs. Des, Chen opened the door with worry etched into every line of her face. "You were on the news," she said. "Both of you." "I know." "Sophie saw." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's confused. Come in." "Yeah." Sophie was sitting on Mrs. Chen's couch, a glass of milk in her hands and uncertainty in her eyes. When she saw Caleb, she set down the glass and ran to him. "Dad, people are saying mean things about you on TV." Caleb knelt down, taking her hands. "I know, sweetheart. They said you're only with Vivian because she's rich. But that's not true, right?" "No, baby. That's not true." "Then why are they saying it?" Vivian crouched beside Caleb. "Because people don't always understand when something real happens. They're used to people lying and using each other, so when they see someone being genuine, they don't believe it. Sophie looked between them. Are you really in love with my dad? Yes. And you, Dad? Do you love her too? Caleb felt the weight of the question, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it permanent, would make all of this real in a way it hadn't been before. Yeah, he said. I do. Sophie threw her arms around both of them, squeezing tight. Then I don't care what anyone says. If you love each other, that's all that matters. If only the world worked that simply. The next 2 weeks were brutal. The media coverage was relentless. Think pieces about class warfare and whether billionaires should date working-class people. Twitter debates about gold diggers and power dynamics. YouTubers making reaction videos to clips of the press conference, analyzing Vivian's body language for signs of manipulation. Caleb stopped reading the comments after the first day, but he couldn't escape them entirely. People recognized him at the grocery store, at the gas station. Some were supportive, most were hostile. One woman actually spat at his feet in the parking lot, calling him a leech. Sophie's school situation got worse before it got better. The principal called again, suggesting maybe Sophie would be happier at a different school. Somewhere with fewer media-connected parents, fewer concerned families worried about disruption. Caleb heard the subtext clearly. They wanted Sophie gone. He pulled her out and started looking at other options. Vivian offered to pay for private school, but Caleb refused. That would just prove everyone right, that he was using her money. So he researched public schools in neighboring districts, filled out transfer paperwork, and tried not to feel like he was failing his daughter. Meanwhile, Vivian was dealing with her own fallout. 2 board members resigned in protest of her relationship. 3 major investors pulled their funding. The company's stock price dropped 12% in 1 week. Her inbox flooded with emails, some supportive, but most questioning her judgment, her priorities, her fitness to lead. She started staying at the office later and later. When she came to the house, she was exhausted, running on coffee and stubbornness. Caleb would find her asleep on the couch at midnight, her laptop still open, work emails unfinished. One night, 3 weeks after the press conference, Caleb woke up at 2 a.m. to find Vivian's side of the bed empty. He found her on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. He sat beside her. The night was cold, autumn giving way to winter. Their breath made small clouds in the air. About what? Whether I made the right choice. Telling everyone about us. Whether I made... Vivian pulled his blanket tighter. The company is hemorrhaging value. My reputation is damaged. Sophie can't even go to school without getting harassed, all because I refused to hide. Do you regret it? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know. I thought being honest would make things better, that people would respect the truth, but they don't. They just use it as ammunition. So what do you want to do? I don't know that either. She turned to look at him. What if Marcus was right? What if I'm not thinking clearly? What if being with you is clouding my judgment? The words stung more than Caleb expected. Do you believe that? I don't want to, but look at the evidence. My company is falling apart. My board is turning on me. Everything I built is crumbling, and the only thing that's changed is you. Then end it, Caleb said quietly. If you think I'm the problem, end it. I don't want to end it, but you're thinking about it. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I'm thinking about everything. I'm thinking about what happens in 6 months, when the company has lost so much value that I get voted out anyway. I'm thinking about Sophie growing up with people calling her dad a gold digger. I'm thinking about you resenting me for ruining your life. You haven't ruined my life. Haven't I? You lost your job. Sophie lost her school. Your ex-wife is giving interviews about what a terrible person you are, all because you met me. Caleb took her hands. They were cold, shaking slightly. Vivian, look at me. Yes, things are hard right now. Yes, we're both paying a price. But you know what I had before you? A life where I went to work, came home, took care of my kid, and went to bed. That was it. No joy, no hope, no future beyond just surviving. You gave me something to care about besides just getting through the day. That's not enough to justify all this. Maybe not, but it's enough for me. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the sky started to lighten. Neither of them solving anything, just holding on. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Caleb was making breakfast when his phone rang. Unknown number. He'd learned to ignore those, but something made him answer. Mr. Ryder, this is Amanda Chen from Child Protective Services. His blood went cold. What? We've received a complaint regarding your daughter's welfare. We need to schedule a home visit to investigate. A complaint from who? I can't disclose that, but the allegations are serious. Neglect, inappropriate living conditions, exposure to dangerous situations. We take these matters very seriously. Caleb's hand tightened on the phone. My daughter is fine. She's healthy. Caleb's hand tightened on the... She's happy. She's taken care of. I'm sure she is, but we still need to investigate. How's tomorrow at 10? He had no choice. He agreed, ended the call, and immediately called Vivian. They're coming after Sophie, he said when she answered. Someone called CPS. They're investigating me for neglect. Silence on the other end. Then, Marcus. He's in custody awaiting trial. How could he owe this? He has friends, lawyers, business associates, people who owe him favors. This is retaliation. Vivian's voice was tight with fury. He knows he can't hurt me directly anymore. So he's going after the people I love. What do I do? Nothing. You let them investigate. Your house is clean. Sophie is clearly well cared for. They'll find nothing because there's nothing to find. But Caleb knew it wasn't that simple. CPS investigations left stains. Even if they found nothing wrong, the mere fact of being investigated would follow him. Future jobs, future relationships, future custody disputes. It would all come up. The investigator arrived the next morning at exactly 10. She was a tired-looking woman in her 40s with a clipboard and the expression of someone who'd seen too much. She walked through the house, taking notes. Checked the refrigerator, the bedrooms, the bathroom. Asked Sophie questions in private, about school, about her dad, about whether she felt safe. Caleb stood in the kitchen, hands shaking while his entire life got examined by a stranger. When she finished, the investigator sat at the kitchen table with her notes. Mr. Ryder, I'm going to be honest with you. Your home is clean, your daughter is healthy, articulate, and clearly well-adjusted. Under normal circumstances, I'd close this case today. But the circumstances aren't normal. You're involved in a high-profile relationship that's generated significant media attention. That attention has impacted your daughter's ability to attend school safely. Some might argue that continuing the relationship despite that impact constitutes a form of neglect. Caleb felt like he'd been punched. You're saying I should break up with Vivian to keep my daughter? You should be what? I'm saying you need to consider what's best for Sophie, not what makes you happy, what's best for her. After she left, Caleb sat at the table for an hour, staring at nothing. When Vivian called, he didn't answer. When she showed up at the door that evening, he almost didn't let her in. But he did. Because despite everything, he needed to see her. They're using Sophie against us, he said without preamble. They can't prove I'm a bad father, so they're saying the relationship itself is harmful to her. Vivian's face was pale. What did the investigator say? That I need to consider what's best for my daughter. That staying with you might constitute neglect. That's insane. Is it? Look at what's happened to her, Vivian. She can't go to school. She can't have a normal childhood. People stare at us in the grocery store. Her own mother is on TV calling me a bad father. All because of us. So what are you saying? Caleb looked at her, at the woman who'd crashed into his life and turned everything upside down. The woman he'd fallen for despite every logical reason not to. I'm saying maybe everyone's right. Maybe we're being selfish. Maybe we should have stayed in our separate worlds where we couldn't hurt each other. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. You don't mean that, don't I? Tell me honestly, Vivian, is this worth it? Is what we have worth destroying both our lives over? Yes, she said it without hesitation. Yes, it's worth it. Even if it means I lose Sophie? The question hung between them. Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, because she couldn't answer that, couldn't tell him to sacrifice his daughter for her. I should go, she said finally. Yeah, you should. She left without another word. Caleb listened to her car pull away, then went to Sophie's room. His daughter was reading in bed, her favorite book about space propped on her knees. Is Vivian gone?
Sophie asked. Yeah. Are you guys fighting, Mom?
Caleb sat on the edge of her bed. Kind of. Because of me? No, baby. Never because of you. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. Sophie set down her book. Dad,
Do you remember what you told me after Mom left? You said that sometimes people leave, but it doesn't mean we did anything wrong. It just means they couldn't stay. I remember.
is that what's happening with Vivian? She can't stay? Caleb felt his throat tighten. I don't know yet. Sophie hugged him.
I like her, Dad. I like her a lot, but I like you more. And if she makes you this sad, maybe she shouldn't stay. Out of the mouths of children.
Caleb held his daughter and tried not to cry. That night, he lay awake thinking about futures. One where he stayed with Vivian and fought through all of this, hoping eventually the world would leave them alone. Another where he ended it cleanly, went back to his small life, protected Sophie from further harm. Both futures felt like losing. His phone buzzed at 3 a.m. A text from Vivian. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about what you said, about whether we're being selfish.
Maybe we are. Maybe wanting something this badly makes us blind to the damage we're causing. But I need you to know something. Whatever you decide, whatever happens next, loving you was not a mistake. You and Sophie gave me something I thought I'd never have. Thank you for that, even if it ends tomorrow.
Caleb read the message 3 times. Then he got out of bed, got dressed, and drove to Vivian's penthouse apartment across town, a place he'd never been, in a building with a doorman and marble floors and an elevator that required a key card to access the top floor. The doorman tried to stop him. Caleb didn't care. He talked his way past security, took the elevator up, and pounded on her door until she opened it. Vivian stood there in pajamas, eyes red from crying, looking at him like she couldn't believe he was real.
What are you doing here, she asked.
I'm done running, Caleb said.
I'm done letting other people decide what we deserve. Marcus tried to kill you. The media tried to destroy us. CPS tried to use my daughter against me. And you know what? We're still standing.
We're still here. That has to mean something. Caleb.
I love you. I'm in love with you. And I'm tired of being afraid of what that means. Vivian pulled him inside and kissed him. It was desperate and messy and real. When they broke apart, both of them were crying.
What about Sophie? Vivian asked. Sophie wants us to be happy. She said so. And I think maybe the best thing I can teach her is that sometimes you have to fight for the people you love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Oh, imbis. But they spent the rest of the night talking about what came next, about how to protect Sophie, about building a life that could withstand the pressure of 2 worlds colliding. It wasn't easy. There were no simple answers. But for the first time in weeks, Caleb felt like they were moving forward instead of just surviving. When dawn broke, they were still awake, still planning, still holding on to each other like lifelines. And somewhere in the city below, the world kept spinning. Reporters kept writing their stories. The internet kept debating their worth. Marcus Vance sat in a cell awaiting trial. But up here, 20 floors above it all, Caleb Ryder and Vivian Laurent decided that love was worth fighting for. Even if the fight never really ended. The fight didn't end. But it changed. 2 days after Caleb showed up at Vivian's apartment, she made a decision that shocked everyone, including him. She stepped down as CEO of Laurent Technologies. Not entirely. She retained her position as board chair and majority shareholder, but she handed day-to-day operations to her COO, a woman named Patricia Okoye, who'd been with the company since the beginning and who Vivian trusted completely. The announcement went out at noon on a Friday, and by evening, the business world was in chaos trying to understand why a 30-year-old billionaire would walk away from the empire she'd built. Vivian didn't explain it to them. She explained it to Caleb and Sophie over dinner that night at the house. I spent 10 years building that company, she said, pushing spaghetti around her plate. 10 years of 18-hour days and sleeping in my office and sacrificing everything for growth. And you know what I realized? I won. The company is worth billions. We have contracts for the next decade. We're going to be fine without me micromanaging every decision. Us. But it's yours, Caleb said. You built it from nothing. I did. And now I'm choosing to build something else. She looked at Sophie, then at him.
Something that actually makes me happy. Sophie's eyes went wide. Does that mean you'll be here more? If your dad and you will have me. Yes. The smile that spread across Sophie's face was bright enough to light the whole house. She launched herself at Vivian, hugging her tight. Caleb watched the two of them, this woman who'd had everything and his daughter who'd had so little, holding on to each other like they'd both found something precious. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Vivian and Caleb sat on the porch in the cold November air. You didn't have to do that, Caleb said. Give up the company. Or Yeshooks. I didn't give it up. I just stopped letting it consume my entire life. She leaned against him. Besides, I have better things to do now. Like what? Like figuring out how to be part of a family. I've never done that before. Seems like it might take some practice. Caleb kissed the top of her head. You're doing fine so far. Am I? Because I still don't know how to braid hair or pack lunches or any of the normal things parents do. Neither did I when Sophie was born. You learn. The CPS case closed a week later. The investigator filed a report stating that Sophie was well cared for, the home was safe, and there was no evidence of neglect. Someone had made a false complaint, likely with malicious intent, and the case was unfounded. Caleb kept the letter in his desk drawer, just in case he ever needed proof that he hadn't failed his daughter. Marcus Vance's trial began in December. Caleb and Vivian didn't attend. Her lawyers handled everything, but they followed the news coverage. The evidence was overwhelming. The sabotaged car, the embezzlement, the forged documents. Marcus's expensive legal team tried every angle, but the facts were too solid. In January, he was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in federal prison. Vivian didn't celebrate when the verdict came down. She just nodded, closed her laptop, and said, "It's over." But some things weren't over. The media attention faded, but never fully disappeared. Caleb and Vivian became one of those couples that people referenced when talking about unlikely relationships. Think pieces were written. A podcast did a 3-part series on them. Someone even optioned the rights to their story for a potential movie, though nothing ever came of it. Caleb hated the attention. Vivian tolerated it. Sophie surprisingly adapted. She changed schools to a small private academy that Vivian insisted on paying for, and when Caleb finally stopped arguing about it, he had to admit Sophie was thriving there. The school had strict policies about media access, and the other parents were wealthy enough themselves that they didn't care about Vivian's money. Sophie made friends. Real friends. Kids who liked her for her, not because of who her dad was dating. Spring came, and with it, changes neither of them expected. Vivian started having headaches. Not terrible ones, just persistent, nagging pains that wouldn't go away. She ignored them for 2 weeks before Caleb made her see a doctor. The doctor ordered tests. The tests came back showing elevated hormone levels. More tests followed. And then, on a Thursday afternoon in March, Vivian called Caleb from the doctor's office with her voice shaking. "I'm pregnant," she said. Caleb nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. The doctor can't explain it. With my condition, she said it should have been impossible, but here we are." "Are you okay?" "Is the baby okay?" "We're both fine. Healthy. The doctor called it a miracle." Vivian laughed, but it sounded like crying. "I never thought. I spent years accepting that I couldn't have children. And now you're going to be a mother." The reality of it hit them both at once. Vivian started crying for real then, sitting in her car in the doctor's parking lot, and Caleb talked her through it, even though he was crying too. When she got home, they told Sophie together. Sophie screamed. Actually screamed with joy, jumping up and down and asking a million questions. "Is it a boy or a girl? When is it coming? Can I help pick names? What if it's twins?" The excitement was so pure, so unfiltered, that Caleb and Vivian couldn't help but laugh. That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep still chattering about baby names, Caleb and Vivian lay in bed staring at the ceiling. "I'm terrified," Vivian admitted. "Me too. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I don't know how to be a mother?" "Then you'll figure it out. Same way I did with Sophie. Same way every parent does. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's worth it." Vivian turned to face him. "We're really doing this. Building a life together. Having a baby. Getting married. She stopped. Wait, are we getting married?
Caleb realized they'd never actually discussed it. They'd been so focused on survival, on fighting off Marcus and the media and CPS, that they'd never talked about the future beyond just making it to tomorrow. Do you want to get married? He asked. I don't know. Do you? They looked at each other and started laughing, because here they were, about to have a baby together, and they couldn't even figure out if they wanted to get married. How about this? Caleb said. Let's not worry about it right now. Let's just focus on the baby and Sophie and getting through the next 6 months without losing our minds. And then what? Then we'll figure it out. We always do. Well, the pregnancy wasn't easy. Vivian's body fought it at first, the old complications from her surgery making things difficult. She was on bed rest for 2 months. Caleb took leave from work to take care of her, and Sophie appointed herself as Vivian's personal assistant, bringing her water and books and telling her stories about school. During those quiet months, something shifted. The chaos of the past year settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Vivian worked from the bed, laptop propped on her knees, while Caleb made meals and Sophie did homework at the desk in the corner. They became a unit, messy and imperfect and real. The baby came in October, 3 weeks early and screaming loud enough to wake the entire hospital floor. A boy. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Perfect fingers and perfect toes in Vivian's dark eyes. They named him Henry. Henry Ryder Laurent. When the nurse asked about the hyphenated last name, Vivian just smiled and said, "We're a team. Both names matter." Sophie held her baby brother for the first time with tears running down her face. "He's so small," she whispered. "You were that small once," Caleb said. "Really?" "Really." Vivian watched from the hospital bed, exhausted and sore and happier than she'd ever been. When everyone finally left and it was just the 4 of them in the quiet room, she looked at Caleb. "We did it," she said. "Yeah, we did. I mean, really did it. Built a family, against every odd, every obstacle, every person who said it wouldn't work." "You sound surprised." "I am. I spent so long thinking happiness was something other people got, that I'd traded it for success, and that was the deal. But then you pulled me out of that car, and everything changed." Caleb held Henry, the tiny weight of his son in his arms, and thought about the night of the storm. How close they'd all come to never existing. If he'd driven past the wreck, if Vivian had died in the crash, if Marcus had won, 1,000 different ways this could have ended in nothing. But it hadn't. They were here, together, messy and complicated and real. 3 months after Henry was born, Vivian made another announcement. She was starting a foundation. The Laurent Family Foundation, focused on supporting single parents and their children. Programs for job training, childcare assistance, education scholarships. Everything she wished had existed when Caleb was raising Sophie alone. "I can't fix everything that's broken," she told Caleb as they worked on the plans. "But I can help. I have money I'll never spend. It should go to people who actually need it." The foundation launched in January to quiet fanfare. Vivian didn't do press conferences or publicity stunts. She just started writing checks and building programs. Within 6 months, they'd helped 200 families. Within a year, thousands. Caleb started working for the foundation too, consulting on what real families actually needed versus what wealthy donors thought they needed. His input shaped programs in ways Vivian's business sense never could. He understood poverty from the inside. He knew which solutions worked and which ones just made people feel good about themselves without actually helping. They made a good team. Different skills, different perspectives, but the same goal. Sophie turned 10 in February, and for her birthday, she asked for something unexpected. She wanted to visit Rachel. Caleb's first instinct was to say no. Rachel had abandoned them, lied about him in interviews, caused pain that Sophie still carried. But when he asked Sophie why she wanted to see her mother, the answer stopped him cold. "Because I have a family now," Sophie said. "A real one with you and Vivian and Henry, and I'm happy, but I think I need to tell Mom that I'm okay, that she didn't ruin my life by leaving. Because maybe if she knows that, she'll stop being so angry all the time." The wisdom of a 10-year-old. Caleb talked to Vivian about it that night. "It's Sophie's choice," Vivian said. "She's old enough to decide if she wants a relationship with her mother. We just have to support her either way." Oi yumani base. So they arranged it. Rachel lived in California now, remarried to a lawyer, no other kids. She agreed to meet Sophie at a neutral location, a park halfway between their cities. Caleb and Vivian drove Sophie there, staying close but giving them space. Caleb watched from a distance as Sophie talked to the woman who'd given birth to her and then walked away. He couldn't hear what they said, but he could see body language. Rachel crying, Sophie calm, measured. After 20 minutes, Sophie hugged her mother once and walked back to the car. How'd it go? Caleb asked. She said she was sorry, that she wasn't ready to be a mom, and she handled it badly. And what did you say? I said I forgive her, but I also told her that she missed out on knowing me, that I'm pretty great, and she doesn't get to be part of that anymore because she chose not to be. Caleb felt pride swell in his chest.
You're pretty great. I know. Sophie smiled. Can we get ice cream on the way home?
They got ice cream, and when they got back to the house, the new house, the one Vivian had bought for all of them with a yard big enough for Sophie to run in and bedrooms for everyone and a porch where Caleb and Vivian could sit in the evenings while Henry slept inside. Sophie went to her room and didn't mention Rachel again. Some wounds healed, some scars stayed. That was just how life worked. 2 years after that first night in the storm, Caleb and Vivian did get married. Not because they had to, not because anyone expected it, but because they wanted to. The ceremony was small. Sophie, Henry, Mrs. Chen, a few close friends. They did it in the backyard under the oak tree. Nothing fancy, just words and promises and the people who mattered. Sophie was the flower girl. She took the job very seriously, scattering petals with the concentration of a surgeon. Henry, at 18 months, mostly tried to eat the decorations. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly what they needed. When the officiant asked if they had their own vows, Vivian went first. Caleb, 2 years ago, I thought I had everything. Money, power, success. I thought that was enough. Then I crashed on a dark road and you stopped. You didn't have to. You had every reason to drive past and let someone else handle it. But you stopped. And you kept stopping. Every time I needed you, every time things got hard, you stopped and stayed. You taught me that the things that matter can't be bought or built. They have to be chosen every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So I'm choosing you, today and tomorrow, and every day after that. Caleb's hands were shaking when he started. Vivian, I'm not good with words. Never have been. But you make me want to try. Before you, my life was about surviving. About getting through each day and making sure Sophie was okay. That was enough because I didn't know there could be more. You showed me there could be. You showed me what it feels like to be seen as more than just a paycheck or a pair of hands. You saw me, and you stayed, even when staying was expensive and dangerous and hard. So I'm staying too, for as long as you'll have me. Sophie was crying. Mrs. Chen was crying. The officiant was trying not to cry. When they kissed, Henry clapped his chubby hands and yelled something that might have been dada or might have been a demand for snacks. Nobody was quite sure. After the ceremony, they had dinner in the backyard. Nothing fancy. Burgers on the grill, potato salad from Mrs. Chen, a cake from the grocery store that Sophie had picked out because it had dinosaurs on it. It was perfect. That night, after everyone left and the kids were asleep, Caleb and Vivian sat on the porch. The same porch where they'd had their first kiss. Where they'd made the decision to fight together. Where they'd planned their future while the world tried to tear them apart. Do you ever think about that night? Vivian asked. The storm? All the time. What do you think would have happened if you hadn't stopped? Caleb considered it. I'd still be at the lumberyard working 60-hour weeks. Sophie would be in that cramped house with the leaky roof. You'd probably be running your company into the ground, chasing metrics that didn't matter. We'd both be alive, though, safe, uncomplicated, and miserable.
Yeah. Vivian leaned against him. I used to think safety was the same as happiness. That if I could just build enough walls, make enough money, control enough variables, I'd be okay. But I wasn't. I was just alone. You're not alone anymore, too. No, I'm not. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Somewhere inside, Henry started crying. Vivian started to get up, but Caleb stopped her. I'll get him. You've been on your feet all day. He went inside and picked up his son,
who immediately stopped crying and grabbed at Caleb's nose. Through the window, he could see Vivian still sitting on the porch, her head tilted back, looking at the sky. Sophie appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect, sweetheart. Are you and Vivian happy?" Caleb looked at his daughter, then at his son, then out at his wife on the porch. "Yeah, baby, we really are." "Good." Sophie yawned. "I told you she was a keeper." She went back to bed. Caleb carried Henry to the porch and sat beside Vivian. Their son fell asleep almost immediately, his tiny hand wrapped around Caleb's finger. "You know what I learned through all of this?" Vivian said quietly. "Everything I thought defined me, the money, the company, the success, none of that actually mattered. The night of the crash, when I thought I might die, I wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or stock prices. I was thinking about how empty my life was, how I'd spent years building an empire and forgetting to build anything worth living for. And now? Now I wake up and Sophie's making too much noise in the kitchen trying to make breakfast. Henry's crying because he's teething. You're half asleep complaining about your back. The house is a mess. There's always something breaking or someone needing something, and I've never been happier." Caleb shifted Henry in his arms. "That's the thing nobody tells you about happiness. It's not perfect. It's not calm. It's just real. And if you're lucky, it's real with people who matter." "Are we lucky?" "Yeah, we are." They stayed on the porch until Henry woke up hungry, and Vivian had to go feed him. Caleb followed them inside, locking the door behind him, checking the windows the way he always did. Old habits from the years when it was just him and Sophie, and every noise in the night was a potential threat. But they were safe now. Not because the world had gotten less dangerous, but because they had each other. The foundation grew over the next 5 years. They helped thousands of families, gave out millions in scholarships and grants and support programs. Vivian wrote a book about her experience, donating all the proceeds to single-parent organizations. Caleb spoke at conferences about what poverty actually looked like and how to help without condescending. They became advocates, not the celebrity kind, but the real kind. The kind who showed up and did the work even when cameras weren't watching. Sophie graduated high school at 17, early admission to a program for gifted students. She wanted to study social work, inspired by watching her parents help people. Vivienne cried at her graduation. Caleb took 1,000 pictures. Henry, now 7, complained that it was boring and could they please go home. When Sophie left for college, the house felt too quiet. Caleb and Vivian wandered around for a week, not quite sure what to do with the silence. Then Henry broke his arm, falling off his bike, and chaos returned. Life moved forward. Not perfectly, not easily, but forward. On their 10th anniversary, Vivian took Caleb back to the spot where her car had crashed. The guardrail had been replaced, the concrete barrier fixed. There was no evidence that anything significant had happened there, just a curve in the road where 2 lives had intersected and everything had changed. "Do you regret it?" Caleb asked. "Stopping your life to build this one?" Vivienne took his hand. "Caleb, I didn't stop my life. I started it. Everything before was just preparation for finding you." They stood there as the sun set, remembering the storm, the fear, the choice Caleb had made to pull over and help a stranger. A choice that had seemed small at the time but had rippled out into everything that came after. "I think about the person I was that night," Vivian said. "So certain I had everything figured out, so convinced that success meant winning. I was wrong about so many things. We both were. But we figured it out. Together." They drove home as dark settled over the highway. Home to Henry, who was probably playing video games instead of doing homework. Home to the life they'd built from wreckage and stubbornness and love that refused to quit even when quitting would have been easier. Because that's what nobody tells you about love. The real kind, the kind that lasts. It's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for. Someone who sees you on your worst day and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who makes the hard days bearable and the good days better. Caleb had pulled Vivian from a wrecked car in the middle of a storm, but in a lot of ways she'd pulled him from wreckage too. From a life that was all survival and no joy. From years of believing he didn't deserve anything better than what he had. They'd saved each other. And then they'd built something worth saving. That was the real story. Not the billionaire and the mechanic. Not the scandal and the conspiracy and the dramatic courtroom reveal. Just two people who'd been alone for different reasons, finding each other in the worst possible circumstances and deciding that together was better than apart. Even when together was complicated. Even when it cost them. Even when the world said it wouldn't work. Years later, when people asked Vivian what the best decision she ever made was, she didn't talk about founding her company or stepping down or starting the foundation. She talked about the moment she decided to stop hiding the relationship, to stand in front of cameras and claim the love she'd found instead of protecting her image. And when people asked Caleb the same question, he didn't talk about pulling over that night in the storm. He talked about showing up at Vivian's apartment at 3 in the morning and choosing to fight instead of run. Because in the end, that's what love is. A series of choices, small ones and big ones. The choice to stop on a dark road. The choice to come back on Sundays. The choice to stand beside each other when the world turns hostile. The choice to keep choosing each other over and over until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. Sophie got married at 25 to a teacher she met while volunteering at the foundation. Henry started high school and discovered he was gifted at music, spending hours at the piano Vivian bought him. The foundation expanded to 12 cities, helping tens of thousands of families find their footing. And Caleb and Vivian grew old together. Not in some fairy tale way where everything was easy, but in the real way, with arguments about money and parenting and whose turn it was to take out the trash, with health scares and financial setbacks and all the normal crises that come with building a life. But also with Sunday dinners that turned into tradition, with Henry's piano recitals and Sophie's wedding and eventually grandchildren who climbed all over them and asked why Grandma used to be on TV, with quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch and loud evenings when the whole family gathered for birthdays and holidays, with a love that started in a storm and lasted through everything that came after. Because some rescues aren't about pulling someone from a wrecked car. Some rescues are about pulling someone back into life, into hope. Into the possibility that happiness isn't something you earn through success or money or power, but something you build with the people brave enough to choose you. Caleb Ryder chose Vivian Laurent when she was bleeding and broken and afraid. Vivian Laurent chose Caleb Ryder when he was struggling and judged and drowning under the weight of other people's opinions. And they kept choosing each other until choosing became their story. Until the billionaire and the mechanic became just Vivian and Caleb. Just two people who found each other in the dark and decided to build something bright. That was enough. That was everything. And when Caleb looked back on his life, on all the years that came after that stormy night, he didn't regret a single choice. Not the hard ones, not the expensive ones, not the ones that cost him his privacy and his simple life and his certainty that he didn't deserve anything better. Because better had found him anyway. In a car crash, in a billionaire's tears, in a love that refused to be stopped by money or class, or the 1,000 ways the world tries to keep people apart. Some nights, lying in bed beside Vivian with Henry asleep down the hall, and Sophie's voice on the phone talking about her own kids, Caleb would think about the man he used to be, the one who thought survival was enough, who believed small and safe was all he deserved. That man was gone, replaced by someone who knew that the best things in life were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Worth choosing every single day, even when choosing was hard. Especially when choosing was hard. Because in the end, that's what separated the life he had from the life he might have had. One choice, made on a dark road in the rain. To stop instead of drive past. To help instead of assume someone else would. One choice that became 1,000 choices. That became a family. That became a love story people still talked about years later. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And real, Caleb learned, was better than perfect any day of the week.